Yeah. Thank you. Inga mano, inga reo, inga iwi. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So thank you and welcome to this arthritis launch of our economic impact that is dear to our heart. I'd like to acknowledge Louisa for hosting the event. It's an important event, and having it in surroundings like this is very special for us as arthritis. I'd like to acknowledge our other MPs, the Honourable Carmel Sipoani, Honourable Michael Woodhouse, Greg O'Connor, Honourable Nick Wagner, Nuke Korooko, Ian McKelvey, Kanwalta Singh, Liz Craig, Anahila Kangogata Suasiiki, and Paul Eagle. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to welcome our fellow board members, our sponsors that are here tonight, members of the ministry, and friends of arthritis. Just want to ask a question, if you don't mind breaking your own patient confidentiality. Who here, if you want to raise your hand, has arthritis? Okay, that's good. Thank you. I was going to ask, is there anyone here who doesn't know anyone who's got arthritis? Because I was going to offer us as surrogates for you so that you knew someone who had arthritis, but there's a significant number. The good thing about New Zealand is we do so many things well, and we should be proud as a nation of what we do well. Unfortunately, our treatment of arthritis isn't one of those things. As another hat of mine as a researcher in the university, I know that we lag behind the UK, Europe, Canada, the US, Australia, all countries that we like to think we're level with in a number of areas. We're way behind in how we treat arthritis. However, we have done some good things, and there are some pockets, and Philip and Louisa kindly alluded to the Far North Gout Arthritis program that we initiated there that got significant tick-offs. And another hat of mine is co-chair of the Mobility Action Program that's run out of the ministry. We've got 17 initiatives that are going around across the country. And though that program hasn't been completed, some of the early data is outstanding in some of the stuff we're able to do. But my challenge is, with that, what do we do about it? The gout program was only a little pilot up north. The Mobility Action Program was a pilot, and that funding stopped and it goes away. So we've got this traction, we've engaged these communities, and then we stop it. That's a huge disservice we do to our country, the people within our country. So the challenge is, how can we do that? And Philip is going to allude to some of those challenges that we've got before us. This report that we're launching today is our initiative and our commitment to ensure that the message about arthritis and the impact gets out to New Zealanders so that we are aware of what impact it has. So Arthritis New Zealand has a lot of work to do in the future. We know it's going to go, growing numbers of people are going to be affected with it. We are going to keep being the voice of those who can't talk. We are going to keep being the advocates for those who can't advocate for themselves, and we are going to keep trying to improve the life of every person in New Zealand who's affected with arthritis. I'd now like to hand you over to Philip Kearney, our CEO, who's going to present the latest report. Philip.
Kia ora everybody, and thank you for coming today in what was pretty miserable conditions. To see such a great turnout is absolutely fantastic. I also would like to thank Louisa for hosting us today. Really appreciate that, and for all the other MPs that have turned out, really appreciate your time. Also could you pass on our thanks to Brendan, who did a great job in getting everything together. Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here this morning and to launch this report. It's the third. We did one in 2005, we did one in 2010, and now 2018. But it's interesting that we should put these figures and things like that before you, because we were challenged recently by an MP, very, very wise MP. And he said to us, don't bring us the problems, bring us the solutions. So the interesting thing is about today is that we'll go through some of the problems, but then we want to propose some of the solutions. So I'll get into it because we're running a little bit behind time. I always think, though, the first thing we should do is remember that we can talk about many millions of dollars. We can talk about many thousands of people. We've just got to bring it back to the simple thing about we're talking about people's lives. This is what I love about this slide, is that these are people, this is the face of arthritis. From the young Tamsin there, who's holding up that thank you note, to Marlene, who celebrated 50 years of arthritis. She actually had a special party on celebrating 50 years of arthritis. And this is the real people that we deal with every day. And I think that's something that we need to remember as we go through these figures. Some of the figures from the report are quite telling. We're talking round about coming up 680,000 people projected who have arthritis. Now, this isn't a competition, but if you take all those with cardiovascular and with diabetes, you don't get that number. So that's the prevalence of arthritis. 17% of the population, or 1 in 6 people, have arthritis, and I think we saw that today. And with the prevalence growing of around about 140,000, we have an increasing problem, and as Louisa mentioned, 1 million people by 2040, which is only 20 years away. I think one of the telling stats, though, is that bottom one. We always think that arthritis is an old person's condition. But when you think about it, near on 50% of people are still working. What does that do in terms of productivity? What does that do in terms of just the well-being of people themselves? So we'll go through a few graphs at the moment just to show you where those are distributed. So if you see here, these are the 3 main types of arthritis. And you'll see that osteoarthritis, obviously around about 400,000. Strong prevalence in female. Gout arthritis, and you'll notice we call it gout arthritis, not just gout. We have renamed it officially. And that's around about 185,000, but very dominant in male. And of course then the rheumatoid arthritis, about 100,000, and it's an interesting, at the NZRA conference on Saturday, just the issue potentially of the number of rheumatologists available to grow with that growing area or number of people with rheumatoid arthritis is going to be a problem in the future. So this just gives you a bit of an overview. Then we get on to one with gender. And you start to see again the numbers of people, particularly in the early stages of 25 to 44, strong male versus female. And I think you'll see that comes out as part of the gout arthritis figures later on. But it also shows clearly that circle shows the 48%. Now, one of the issues here is that if we don't start acting on those people 25 to 45 in terms of starting to do prevention, all we're going to do is carry the problem up into the latter years. So that's where the intervention needs to start to come, in those early days. So we need to have the programs put in place that actually targets that population. So this will be interesting to some of you, particularly those in the areas of high arthritis concentration. So we see really 3 areas, obviously Northland, right through the sort of mid-central of the North Island and down south, and then through West Coast and South Canterbury. Interesting that when we do a comparison of, say, gout arthritis, and we'll put that map up very shortly, it changes. So it's something, again, about where is the concentration of arthritis generally. I think this is an interesting one. This is by ethnicity. And you start to see those two left-hand graphs, bars on the graph, with male Māori and male Pacific, and the dominance there of arthritis in those two groups, particularly male. Obviously, we're not going to take away from the right-hand side, which is still quite strong in osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis, but the two figures I want to concentrate on are the two left-hand ones. And we'll just show that in another way with the impact on Māori. Sorry, I'll go back one. There we go. Go to the impact on Māori, and you see there that's male and female. So the first one is male Māori and male non-Māori, and then female Māori and female non-Māori. So strong emphasis again on the male gout arthritis population going forward. Now, when we see the figures coming up very shortly, we suddenly understand what is that impact. What is that impact not only on the nation, but what is that impact on the family? So this is the big numbers, and you would have seen some of these already on the handouts on your table. We look at the three areas, and we'll go through them in just a little bit more detail as to what they are. But $12.2 billion per annum. That's a lot of money. I think we export about $10 billion in terms of dairy. So it just gives you an idea. If we're taking a bit of a long bow on that one, but that's okay. You know, it sort of gives you an idea of what the costs are. And I think when you look at it, though, if you see the black numbers underneath each of those big numbers, that's per person. So when you look at it, $1,482 per person is spent on hospital or sort of healthcare sector. There on 5,000 on indirect costs, and about 12,000 on well-being costs. Now, that's per person that has arthritis. Imagine if we could make a saving of just 2% on those numbers. I want you to keep that number in your mind. Imagine if we could make a 2% saving. That's $250 million. That's a small number. $250 million. So I want to come back to that later on. To give you an idea where this sits with other conditions, the graph at the bottom right shows that obviously on the left-hand side, with cancer being about 17% or 18% of costs, cardiovascular about 14.7%, and then musculoskeletal about 12.9%. Now we're taking the fact that that obviously includes osteoporosis as well, but it's still up there very closely with cardiovascular and just aligning with mental health as well. And interesting in terms of the diabetes at the right-hand side. So it just gives you an idea of where it all sits in terms of the scale of costs for our country. So just quickly going through the three areas, you'll see now these are the sort of the breakdown of the health costs. And you'll see that, obviously hospitals and GPs make up the bulk of it, around about 70-odd%, 77%. And that's what was expected. But this report goes into quite a lot of detail in terms of the costs right the way through, in terms of pathology, pharmaceuticals, and aged care. So it gives those researchers a real opportunity to delve down into those numbers and start to pull out some findings from this research. I think this one's an interesting one. This is the indirect costs. And when you break it down and you look at the two big ones, informal and formal community care of about $1.5 billion, you start to think of those costs of having to look after somebody, either formally or when you have to take that time off because you can't get somebody to look after one of your loved ones. It's a cost to the country. And on the right-hand side, you look at the productivity costs, and this is the costs of having arthritis and not being able to work. So if you look at reduced employment, in other words, I can't work as much as I want to, or I used to, that's about half $500 million a year. Presenteeism, about a quarter of that, which is about lack of productivity. I used to be able to do it this fast, but now I can't do it so fast. So I just need to, I don't have the productivity. And then basically temporary absenteeism, the time I've got to take off work, is about a third. So those are the costs, those are real costs to our society, these are real costs in New Zealand. And again, how could we save 2%? And lastly, this is the one that is the well-being, and for a number of us, this is quite new, I have to be honest, but it is part of the New Zealand Treasury Living Standards Framework, so it is very much taken into their calculations in terms of well-being. And I won't go into how they actually, are we going? Yep, sorry, we're still there. I won't go on how they calculated it because it looked like a very highly sort of complicated scientific formula, but they came out with this cost and the number of disability adjusted life years. And so it's like, this is a big cost to us in terms of those immeasurables sometimes. We've measured those ones that we can't really put our finger on in terms of impact of pain, suffering, disability, and premature death because of arthritis. So a legitimate cost, but something that we should be fully aware of. And we've already gone to this number. Think about that, in 1 million will be having arthritis in 20 years' time. That seems like a long way away, 2040, but go back to when you just turn of the century, 2000, what were you doing? It doesn't seem that long ago, does it? So we need to be doing things now compared to waiting to 2040 to do another report to say, oh my goodness, we've got to 1 million. We need to have some interventions. Very quickly out of the report, these were 4 recommendations. The first recommendation was a cost-effective interventions, and Peter's already mentioned the MAP program and those sort of programs that really do target better management, self-management of arthritis and other comorbidity areas. We obviously looked, and we'll discuss a bit more detail, the model of care that we're advocating for today. And it's something that we think needs to be put into place in New Zealand to give a consistency of care right throughout the country. Boy, I would go for this one, better data. I imagine that a lot of people around here are going, if we could only get better data. It seems it is very difficult to get accuracy on some of the key figures that we need to make some decisions, particularly when sometimes we're dealing with 21 different DHBs all calculating or all collecting in a different way. I would just make that as a plea if we could get that changed, it'd be nice. And for all of you who are researchers, continued investment in research and development. Obviously this is something key that we need. We see this report not as an end point, but as a starting point to work off and take this to the next level, and we know already some of the researchers are going to take this and move it, and actually we'll understand it even better. So I know I've got a couple of minutes, but I want to go into the key thing of solutions, because this is what it should be about. And I'm going to put some fairly provocative numbers up, but that's okay, I'm up here and I can do that. But let's go into one of the first ones, which is about the national model of care. And what we're suggesting here, or recommending, that there needs to be a 5-stage model of care. We've based it on the Australian model, and we think that's a really good base to start with. And I'll just quickly go through the 5 stages. Look, in terms, the prevention is the first one. We've got to get in early. I think we talked about that, you know, the 25-year-olds, we need to be doing things now, not waiting for people to have the issue. We need to have early diagnosis. We need to have trained and resourced health professionals. And I have to say, and I'm just make a story, a situation here that we hear well too often, our educators. You know, the person will go into the clinician and say, I've got a sore knee. And they say, oh, you've got arthritis. You know, he might be about 35, 40. You've got arthritis. Here's some pills. Come back when it's really bad, and we'll put you on the waiting list to get a knee replacement. Now, I can't think that that is about really good diagnosis and management of arthritis, because we know that there's a lot more we can do for people than that. We need better trained clinicians. The next one is early treatment, of course, and that's the right medication. And we know that, you know, with gout arthritis, if you get the early medication and get it on right, then things will change in terms of their lives. But it's not just about getting the right medication, it's the next stage of actually managing it and continuing to look after those people on medication. Because there's no point, and I'll reach down to my allopurinol here, that if you start to take it, and then after 3 years or 4 years, you go off it because you're cured. Life means life, not 13 years and good behavior. It means life. So this is some of the things that we need to get through in terms of education and messaging. And the last one, of course, is advanced care and surgery, and that's right pre- and post-op surgery assistance. And boy, there's some things there that we can do in terms of getting people ready for surgery and also looking after them afterwards, particularly in arthritis. But I want to really put one thing on the table today about gout arthritis, because we think this could be the breakthrough that we need in terms of changing this nation's attitude and acceptance of arthritis. We think there'll be 250,000 people with arthritis, gout arthritis in 2040. There's a huge prevalence in Maori and Pacific Island men. Not an easy group to get to. Very proud, but very susceptible to gout arthritis. Potentially it's a managed situation. I've got allopurinol here, and I'm not so naive to say that this is the silver bullet, but there is a way of actually managing this so people can go back to their normal lives. And the cost of this is minuscule. Produced here in New Zealand, it is absolutely nothing. And it should be something that makes a difference to people's lives every day. But you have to take it every day too, so that's part of the education. But I think one of the key points for me is it opens a conversation with those groups that are susceptible or not looked after about a number of other things. So we can go and have a discussion about gout arthritis because, you know, it's Uncle Tom up the road here has got it, and, you know, we can go and see the family. But it starts a conversation about other types of arthritis, about osteo and rheumatoid. So we get there, we talk about gout, but we can talk about the family, what else have they got? But potentially, more importantly, it starts a conversation also about heart disease and diabetes, because the comorbidity between gout arthritis and diabetes and heart disease is huge. So what we've got to be able to do here is this might be a great indicator or a great starter to actually start to look after and look at some of these other conditions. So what a good way of starting. So this is where I want to put, next one is, this is where the graphs are of those with gout arthritis. Generally, there are about 5 key areas: Northland, the counties Manukau, Tairāwhiti, Capital Coast, the Wanganui and the mid-central, and down through South Canterbury and a bit on the west coast. Now my feeling is that if we could start to target some of these areas, specifically with programs and using the knowledge we have from Northland, and thinking differently, we will not be able to solve tomorrow's problems with today's thinking. We need to change that. We need to make it whānau-based, we need to make it community-driven with us as support. It's not about chucking lots and lots of money at it, it's about being smart with the money that we might throw at it and getting the results and evidence base that we need to drive change. So this is my audacious goal. Got to have one of those. I want to, and for target for 2040 is to have 90% of managed program with 200,000 lives on this sort of program. So 90% of people, 200,000. Work with Māori and Pacific communities and save the country about $2.1 billion a year. Now that isn't, we assume that there's still medical costs and so forth, so it has been discounted. But we think we could do that in terms of change the lives of so many people. Audacious? Definitely. But let's step it down a bit, because I believe that we need to take some stepping stones. So the one that I want to do is looking at gout arthritis over the next 5 years. I want to take the percentage of people on a managed program from 45% to 55%. Now those are generally averages. I want to take that, so people who are on a managed program, generally around allopurinol, about 10%, well not 10%, but between 45 to 55. That's going to affect 20,000 people. Now the economic benefits, if we're just talking money, remember it's about people, but we'll talk economic benefits, is for the health, we'll save $20 million a year in year 5, obviously save some, this is by the way per annum, 65 million in indirect costs, and well-being costs of about 159 million. And with a total of 244 million. Now remember I was talking about that 2%? That's 2%. That's 2% saving on the overall cost of arthritis in New Zealand per annum. We can do it. We can do it. So what are we doing about that today? Well, we are going to start a petition, and you'll see this, and we would like you to participate in this petition. This is my last slide, or second to last slide. And this petition is going to go to the Select Committee. I think that's the process. Does it go to Select Committee? And we want, with the wording that says, that the House pass legislation to establish a national model of care for people with arthritis, with a particular emphasis on gout arthritis as a form of arthritis that disproportionately impacts Māori and Pacific communities. Now, on the table today, there is the petition. We would like you to sign it, please. Now, it isn't compulsory, but we think that this is a start to making a statement with Parliament about the importance of gout arthritis, but also we want to take this not only to Parliament, but we want to take this to the DHBs and get them as part of the process planning and growing their, I suppose, support of arthritis. So we would like you to do that. So I just want to say, Louisa, thank you for this opportunity of launching this economic report today. This is available at the desk as you walk out, so please, if you would like to grab one, it's the full reports there, which is 93 pages. I would happy to take any questions. I appreciate we're way over time, but happy to take any quick questions. But if the people could sign the petition, we'll take that together, and we will then keep you informed as to the next steps that we're going to take in terms of this journey that we've got over the next 5 years. So thank you very much indeed. I appreciate you coming out on such a disgusting day. And I've really enjoyed meeting so many people, so thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Is there any questions? Any hard ones Peter will answer? I'll answer the easy ones. No, fantastic. Thank you very much indeed.